John Skelton, your prime suspect?
Yes, yeah. John Skelton is the primary suspect in this, and like I said, we're going to be moving forward with this investigation.
Hello everybody, welcome back, and thank you for joining me for another true crime video. Today, we're talking about the case of the Skelton brothers. 3 small boys, all under the age of 10, who vanished, all of them, together in 2010. On Wednesday, November 24th, 2010, Tanya Zuvers dropped her 3 young sons off at her parents' house. She hugged them, kissed them, and told them that she hoped they would have a good Thanksgiving with their father the next day. She and her husband, John Skelton, had been having some marital and custodial issues, and they'd been living in separate homes since she had filed for divorce the previous September 13th. But he was allowed to see the boys on weekends, and they would be with him until that following Friday morning. She didn't know it was the last time she would ever see them, the last time that she would hold them or kiss them, but it was. John Skelton is Josh Powell, Casey Anthony, and Michael Turney, all wrapped into one narcissistic, compulsive lying bundle. And this sad case has more convoluted twists and turns than I can even keep up with. Keep in mind, please, throughout this, I'm not on the side of John or his ex-wife Tanya. I am and will always be on the side of the victims. And in this case, we have 3 boys who vanished and who have never been found. And I'm telling you this story for them, not because we want to determine who was more wrong, the mother or the father, not because we want to determine who did more or who cared more, but because we want to know who they were. We want to know their story because they're the ones who actually matter. Before we get started, let's have a word from our sponsor, and our sponsor for this video is GlassesUSA.com. Glasses USA is the only place I've ordered glasses from for years, even before going to stores was a matter of public health. As a mother and someone who works a lot, I still found it more convenient to be able to order my glasses online and have them delivered right to my front door. Using GlassesUSA.com's virtual mirror, you can try on any pair of frames and see what they look like on your face by uploading a picture of yourself. Shopping online with Glasses USA also means a risk-free shopping experience with free shipping and returns. You can add any type of prescription to almost any pair of frames, including sunglasses. And Glasses USA's lenses are of the same high quality you'll find in any glasses store, and they're made in their own state-of-the-art lab as well. They even offer blue light blocking lenses specifically designed to protect your eyes from harmful blue light rays emitted from digital devices such as your smartphone and your laptop. And that's why you guys sometimes see that my glasses are reflecting in a kind of annoying way to you, but it is a blue light blocker because I spend a lot of time staring at screens. I am someone who spends a ton of time on the computer researching, writing, and editing, and I make sure that I always have the blue light black coating on my lenses so that my eyes aren't being strained. Best of all, Glasses USA has hundreds of frames to choose from, even brand names such as Coach and Ray-Ban. And because they cut out the middleman, they're able to offer these same frames to you for 70% off retail prices. A complete pair of glasses starts at only $30, and free basic prescription lenses are included with every frame. Now, you can shop for prescription eyewear online at affordable prices without leaving the comfort of your own home. Just as an example of the quality and selection GlassesUSA.com has to offer, I wanted to show you a few pairs of glasses I just ordered. Summer's here, and we're spending a lot more time outside in the sun, and I'm always wearing sunglasses when I'm outside so I don't get wrinkles from squinting. And I really wanted a few more prescription options to go with different outfits because if I don't have on prescription glasses, I'm not seeing anything. This pair of Tory Burch sunglasses are my all-time favorite because they feel very glamorous and old Hollywood. I love how they look, and I'm really into that. I also got this pair of Muse times Hilary Duff Susan sunglasses in pink, and I thought that they would fit really well when I'm going for a more 60s flower child kind of vibe. I also wanted to step outside my comfort zone and pick some different color eyeglasses, and I'm loving these ones. These are the Amelia E. Striga glasses, and they come in this vibrant blue color. I actually met with my lawyer last week, and he commented on how cool he thought they were. And then I have these Muse Gladys eyeglasses in multicolor, and they have this really cool balayage effect that's really unique and eye-catching. So if you're interested in getting a new pair of eyeglasses way cheaper than in the store without leaving your house, because have you ever attempted to try on glasses while wearing a face mask? It's not fun. It's not fun. Check out the link in the description box to get 60% off your first pair of frames at glassesusa.com. And all the glasses I've received will also be in the description box as well if you're interested in checking them out. Thank you so much to Glasses USA for sponsoring this video, and let's get started. John Skelton was 39 years old in 2010. He'd been born in Jacksonville, Florida, and after high school, he'd joined the Army and then moved around quite a bit, spending some time in Washington, D.C., where he worked at the Walter Reed Hospital before going on and settling in Alaska, and even spending some time in California. He got married to Tanya Zuvers in 2002. It was a second marriage for both of them, but they felt this time love would conquer all, and they moved into a 3-bedroom home on Congress Street in Tanya's hometown of Morenci, Michigan. Morenci is located in Lenawee County, and it shares a southern border with Ohio. In 2010, there were only about 2,200 people living there, so it was a small town where everyone knew everyone else, and a nice, safe place to settle down and raise a family, which Tanya and John would do. John already had a daughter from his first marriage, and Tanya had 2 older daughters from her first marriage, but together they had 3 sons. Andrew, who was born on November 4th, 2003, Alexander, who was born on November 20th, 2005, and Tanner, who was born on October 20th, 2001. In 2010, they were 9, 7, and 5 years of age. They were known around town as normal, happy-go-lucky kids who loved playing outside together. Andrew, the oldest, was described as being too smart for his own good. He loved playing outside almost as much as he loved playing video and computer games, which he was very good at. His nickname was the National Enquirer because he had all the family gossip and he was always looking for more. He liked school, and out of the 3, he was the most quiet and timid. His mother said if he had something to ask you, he would crawl into your lap and gently tap your arm to get your attention. Alexander, the middle son, was a notorious daredevil who loved jumping his bike, climbing, racing, and getting dirty. He was always getting into trouble, and he'd sometimes spray his sisters with a garden hose. He had an interest in cell phones, and he always wanted to look at and examine everyone's phone to see how they worked. His grandparents gave him one of their old flip phones, and he used to wear it proudly on a belt clip. The youngest, Tanner, had a very active imagination and loved making up stories and telling them in a way where the adults around him would believe him, only to laugh after he'd convinced them and tell them that he was just kidding. He loved getting attention from and cuddling with his mother. Even though his brothers were a few years older than him, Tanner felt he could keep up with them, and he hated being left behind when they played. They all played on the Morenci PTO soccer team, and they loved to go camping with their family. It was said that all 3 boys would ride bikes and be outside all day if they were allowed, and that they could smell McDonald's from a mile away. Their father, John, had been working as a truck driver, but when he got a DUI, he lost his job, and he had to find other, lower-paying work, which caused some financial strain and marital problems. Tanya had been a stay-at-home mother and was attending a local community college trying to get her business degree. So John had always been the main breadwinner. It seems that John could also be a very selfish person, and when money was tight, he became more so. Tanya said he would fall short of making sure the bills were paid or that there was food in the house, but he always found money to buy his cigarettes and his beer. Facing a money shortage, John spent some time in jail in 2009 after failing to pay child support to his daughter from his first marriage. Tanya had her own troubles with the law as well. In 1998, years before she met John and while she was still married to her first husband, she'd pleaded guilty to 4th-degree sexual misconduct after having sex with a 14-year-old boy that worked on rental properties she and her husband had opened and managed. This boy was a minor at the time, so there isn't a lot of information about the situation available, as it should be. But I do see it often described in articles and books about this case. It's described as a consensual relationship, which I have a hard time with because 14 years old is below the age of consent, so it can't technically be a consensual relationship. After Tanya's husband at the time discovered what she'd done, he filed for divorce, understandably, and, she wasn't an angel. She wasn't perfect. She'd certainly made mistakes in the past, serious mistakes, in my opinion, but she hadn't hidden her history from John, making sure that when they were dating, she was pretty much upfront about everything, and he had never voiced a concern about her previous bad choices. He'd never seemed to care about her past criminal activity. He didn't have a problem with it, essentially, and he proceeded to marry her and have 3 children with her after she told him this. According to Tanya, up until September of 2010, they had a normal marriage, a good marriage for the most part. They'd have your typical husband and wife arguments, but nothing worse than that. And she thought they were happy. She thought that they were happy and that John was satisfied with their life, but after he took a solo trip to his hometown of Jacksonville, Florida, to attend a high school reunion, he began expressing interest in leaving Michigan and moving to Florida. He'd started talking to Tanya about this idea the first weekend in September, and he felt that he'd be able to find a better, higher paying job in Florida, and it would also give their sons a chance to connect with his side of the family. Now, the relationship between John and his side of the family, his parents and siblings, etc., is complicated. We'll talk about that more in depth later. According to Tanya, she was never big on the idea of leaving Michigan. All her family, who she was very close to, as well as her friends, were in Morenci. The boys' friends were in Morenci, and she hated hot, humid weather. On top of that, due to the felony on her record, she'd have to meet certain requirements and jump through certain hoops to even be legally allowed to leave the state. When they woke up on the morning of Monday, September 12th, Tanya brought the 3 boys to school. And when she got back, John told her that he was going to work and he'd be back around noon. Tanya told him that when he got home, they could make some phone calls and see exactly what she would have to do in order to leave the state, and then they could discuss the possibility of moving to Florida a bit more in depth. After John left for work, Tanya and her daughter Courtney ran some errands, but when she returned, there was a message on her home answering machine from the boys' school. The secretary informed her that John, her husband, and their father had come in that afternoon and taken all 3 boys out of school early, informing the school that they were going on a family vacation to Florida. But this had confused the secretary since Tanya had dropped them off that morning and she'd brought with them their medicine and their lunches as if she intended for them to be present for the entire school day. Tanya called John immediately to find out what was going on, and he told her, listen, we talked about this. We talked about going on a vacation, but you said you didn't want to come with us. And Tanya was like, hold up. No, that's not what we talked about at all. We talked about moving to Florida, and I told you I was going to figure out what I needed to do to make that possible. So clearly it's suspicious, right? Tanya knows that they never talked about going on a family vacation to Florida. Tanya knows that John was very serious and clear about his intentions to move to Florida, so she got worried. A friend of Tanya's called the Morenci police station and spoke to Chief Larry Weeks. Weeks thought that it would be a good idea if he reached out to John and tried to talk John down. He could act as the middleman and hopefully keep things calm and civilized. But when he called, he found out that John hadn't even left Michigan yet. John was just driving around town with the kids in his van, not wanting to go home with them. John informed Chief Weeks that, he hadn't left yet, but he was still planning on it. He was going to bring his sons on a vacation. He wanted them to see the beach and see the ocean. And the only reason he hadn't left yet was because he'd called a lawyer and set up a meeting, so they weren't planning to take off until after this meeting. And according to Tanya, the fact that he had scheduled a meeting with a lawyer threw up a lot of red flags for her. And it threw up a lot of red flags with the police too, since meeting with an attorney isn't typically something you do right before going on a family vacation with your kids, which you plan to return from. More red flags were raised when John told Chief Weeks that they were going to Florida and he wouldn't be returning for 3 to 4 weeks. The school year in Morenci had just started, and when John was asked the question of why he would take his sons out of school within the first month of it being in session, he claimed he planned to enroll them in a Jacksonville school and look for a job while he was there, also something that's not typical to do when you're on a vacation. Tanya knew that John would be unable to enroll the boys in school without their birth certificates and social security numbers, which were at home with her. So Tanya called John to try and convince him to come home and get that paperwork. As John and Tanya were having this discussion, Tanya's older daughters from her first marriage were physically meeting with a lawyer on behalf of their mother, and Tanya knew that she just had to buy time so they could figure out what steps needed to be taken to prevent John from leaving the state with her kids legally. The attorney had told Tanya's daughters that the only way this could be accomplished was if Tanya filed for divorce and requested emergency custody of the boys. So Tanya was able to convince John to come back home with their sons so she could look for the birth certificates and give them to him. Now, she never actually planned on handing them over, obviously, and she knew where they were the whole time, but she needed to stall long enough for her daughters to return with the paperwork from the lawyer. A police officer was already standing by, ready to serve John Skelton with the paperwork, which would make it illegal for him to leave the state with the boys without their mother's permission. John did return to the family home on Congress Street. The older boys, Alexander and Andrew, remained outside playing in the yard, but 5-year-old Tanner had come inside with his father, wanting to see his mom. When John was there at the house, Tanya put on a show of searching through files and desk drawers, looking for the birth certificates, even though she'd already found them within the first 5 minutes of getting home. As this was happening, Tanya's daughters called her and told her to just hang on for a little bit longer because they were currently leaving the lawyer's office with the paperwork. But then something unfortunate happened, something ironic, and completely one of those things where you ask, what are the odds? It turned out that the lawyer John had made an appointment with for later that day was the same lawyer that Tanya's daughters had already met with in person and paid a retainer for, so the lawyer's office called John to cancel his appointment at 4 o'clock that evening since they were now representing his wife and they couldn't legally represent them both. Out of the over 200 attorneys in the county, Tanya could not believe that she and her husband had contacted the exact same one, since neither of them had any relationship or interaction with this lawyer before that day. When John gets this call from the lawyer's office, he's standing in her house. He's in his office while she's pretending to look for the paperwork. And he was livid. He came out of his office screaming to Tanya that she lied to him. She was trying to trick him. As the argument escalated, little Tanner ran and hid behind his mother's legs. And his father yelled at him to get in the car because they were leaving, but Tanner was too scared to obey. At that moment, Tanya's friend, who was also present, grabbed Tanner up into her arms to prevent John from physically taking him. John rushed out of the house, gathered up his other 2 sons who were scared and crying, and got them into his van, speeding out of the driveway and down the road, almost running over Tanya's sister, who at that time was walking up the street to Tanya's house. She jumped out of the way at the last minute and began screaming at him to stop as he drove off. Less than a minute after John had made his speedy getaway, Tanya's daughters arrived with the paperwork and the police officer, but it was too late. John, Alexander, and Andrew drove all night until they arrived in Jacksonville. The next day was Tanya's birthday, and she was relieved when she received a call from her 2 sons who wanted to wish her a happy birthday. During this phone call, they told their mother that they were at Hillary's house, swimming and playing with Hillary's daughter. Tanya recognized the name Hillary as somebody that John had talked about after returning from his high school reunion a few months prior, so Tanya tracked down the address of this woman and headed to Florida with her 2 daughters, her mother, and the paperwork which stated she had been granted exclusive custody of Alexander, Andrew, and Tanner. It had been 5 days since John had driven away from the home that they had all once lived in as a family. And when Tanya arrived in Florida on Friday, she met with a sheriff's deputy in Jacksonville to accompany her to Hillary's apartment and serve John with the divorce and custody paperwork so that she could bring her sons home. Once she had Andrew and Alexander safe with her, it still wasn't over. Local law enforcement and the courts had become involved, so now Tanya and John had to meet with a judge before she could drive back to Michigan with her kids. The following Monday, Tanya hired an attorney in Jacksonville, and they showed up to the court date to find that John had also hired an attorney. Tanya was shocked. When John told the judge his justification for taking his sons was because his wife was a registered sex offender, John had known all about Tanya's past indiscretions even before they'd gotten married. She'd made sure to give him all that information while they were still dating, and he had never seemed to have a problem with it. I'll stress that again. She told him he knew he did not have a problem with it, to the point where he felt safe having 3 children with her. He never suggested to her or anybody else that he felt unsafe with his wife being around his sons. Tanya's lawyer pretty much said just that to John and the judge, and the Jacksonville judge called Judge No in Michigan, who stated that she didn't feel Tanya's past issues with the law held any relevance in this particular custody hearing. So this is Judge Margaret No in Morenci, who, it's a small town, so she's like one of the only judges in town, and you'll see her name come up a few more times. So Judge Margaret No pretty much said, I don't really see how Tanya's past activities have anything to do with this case that we're talking about today, which is, the custody hearing. John kidnapped his 2 kids essentially and took them out of the state. Tanya had to track him down, follow him, take them back. So in the wrong at this point was clearly John Skelton, and he was dredging up things from the past in order to make his actions seem more justified. Jacksonville, Florida didn't want to deal with the Skelton drama, so Tanya and John were basically informed that they needed to leave the state immediately and drive back to Michigan. Between Florida and Ohio, they would have joint custody. The kids could ride in whoever's car they wanted. But as soon as they left Ohio and crossed into Michigan, all 3 boys needed to be in Tanya's car, and she would have full custody and the right to not allow her children to see their father. Once back in Michigan, John changed his tune. He was no longer angry or accusatory. He wanted to make things work with Tanya. After what he just put her through, Tanya had no interest in ever returning back to the way things were. But she didn't feel comfortable shutting that door, not knowing what he might do when faced with the reality that their marriage was over and he'd lost custody of his kids. So in order to keep him appeased and calm, Tanya suggested that they all go to therapy and try to work things out to keep their family together. Tanya said she knew she'd never be able to trust John again. Anything else she may have been able to overlook or forgive, even an infidelity on his part, but he messed with her children, and that was something that she would never forget, never forgive. She met with her attorney, and together they decided that it would make her look more favorable to a judge if she cooperated with John and offered him visitation. Tanya felt that if John was under the impression that she was willing to work things out and there was a chance they would be together again, he wouldn't pull another fast one on her and he would try to be on his best behavior. But how long did she really think she could have kept that charade up? How long did she think he would have waited and been patient? They did, however, decide to live apart. John stayed in the family home on Congress Street, and Tanya and the boys moved into a vacant house that one of her daughters owned nearby and was trying to sell, but it hadn't sold yet, so it was empty. This house was literally just over 2 blocks away, and John could see into the backyard from his own house, especially as fall turned to winter and the leaves began to fall, leaving the trees bare. Tanya had decided that staying that close to John would be good for her kids. They'd be close to their father, and they'd also still be able to play with all their friends in the neighborhood. It wouldn't be a huge change for them. They wouldn't be completely uprooted. During the week, the boys remained with Tanya, and most weekends they stayed with John. And this arrangement continued peacefully for about 2 months, and they were planning their visitation schedule for the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. Tanya had no reason to believe that anything was amiss or that John was planning something. However, the weekend before Thanksgiving, John did something that didn't make Tanya feel like doing him any favors and kind of cemented her feelings that she couldn't trust him. According to her, John told her sons that Tanya had been in prison, and he told them why. When they got back home, the boys were obviously not in a good place mentally. What their father had told them made them feel worried that at any point their mother could be hauled off to jail again or taken away and they would lose her. She did her best to keep her own anger in check, and she gently put their fears to rest, telling her sons that this had happened a very, very long time ago, long before they were born, long before she'd even met their father, and it was nothing that they needed to worry about now. She put them to bed that evening, and that was when she gave herself permission to feel the anger that had been boiling inside of her. She grabbed the phone and called her husband. They had an argument. The initial plan had been for John to have the kids from Wednesday evening, the day before Thanksgiving, to the following Friday at 3 p.m., but he'd asked her if they could stay longer on Friday since he wanted more time with them. She'd been considering it before this, but she now let John know that it wouldn't be an option for him before hanging up. So the plan for that Thanksgiving break, it kind of stayed as it was. The plan was that Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner would go to Tanya's mother's house on Wednesday, November 24th, 2010. Their father would pick them up from there later that day. Tanya had left them there, promising to see them in a few days. She said, "I'll see you on Friday." She felt that everything was normal and that she would, in fact, see them in a few days. The next day, Thanksgiving, John called and had 1,000 questions for her about what was next for them as a couple. Are you going to move back in soon? Are we going to be together soon? Like, what's the next step? Tanya was getting a little tired of playing this game and the pretenses, pretending that she wanted things to work out with him. So she told him, I'm not in the right mindset to answer that question conclusively at this point. You already broke my trust when you took my kids to Florida without my permission. And now you betrayed me again by telling our very young sons something about my past that I'd been waiting to share with them until they were older and could understand better. Tanya was already hurt and felt betrayed by the whole Florida incident, and this was just the cherry on top, or the straw that broke the camel's back. And Tanya claims while she was having this conversation with John on the phone, she could hear the boys in the background being very, loud, playing video games, just sounding completely normal. This was the last time she'd ever hear their voices. This was the last time she'd ever hear the sounds of them playing, the joyous sounds of them laughing together or jumping up and down. This was the last time, but she didn't know that. On Friday morning, Tanya texted John to ask if there was any way she could pick up the boys earlier than 3 p.m. because she'd missed them and she wanted to see them. John told her he'd really like to help her out and that usually wouldn't be any problem, but he and the boys weren't home at that time, which was confusing to Tanya since she was able to see his van parked in the driveway from the window of the house she was living in, which she mentioned to him. So John quickly backpedaled, and he claimed that he'd left the van at the house the day before when some friends of his had picked he and the boys up so they could spend Thanksgiving at the house of his friends. Through a series of phone calls and texts that would follow, John Skelton changed his story many times. At first, he told Tanya that he'd see if they could get home earlier, but then he told her that he wasn't actually even with their sons, that his friend Joanne had picked them up and taken them while he stayed home, but she was bringing them back to Morenci by 3 in time for Tanya to pick them up. So John told his wife that the woman who had their sons was named Joanne Taylor. And Tanya didn't personally know Joanne, but John had told her about a family he'd helped one day while he was still a truck driver. He'd apparently pulled over and helped a family on the side of the road with their tire, and this family ended up being Joanne and her husband and their kids. And then ever since then, John and Joanne and her husband had been real tight online and sending Facebook messages back and forth. Additionally, sometime in September or October, after John had kidnapped the kids and taken them to Florida, but before Tanya had filed for divorce, someone named Joanne friended Tanya on a parenting site called Cafe Mom. But remember, this is a very, very small town, and Tanya had never met this woman in real life. Neither had anyone in Morenci, for that matter. So when John told her that her children were with some strange woman that she had never met and nobody knew, Tanya panicked. She freaked out and she got very worried. She called John again to try and get more information, and at that time, John told her that he was driving to an Ohio hospital because he had hurt his foot, But this was not the same story that he told the people at the hospital. According to hospital records, John had told the staff that he tried to hang himself and he was checked in on a mental health hold. Tanya could not sit around and wait for this person to return with her children. So she called her lawyer, who told her to wait until 3 p.m. to call the police. And I gotta tell you, I have to struggle with this one because I understand that as a person, you probably want to, follow your lawyer's legal advice. That's what you have them for. They know best. But as a mother, my kids are with a stranger. My husband, who's clearly off his rocker and already tried to kidnap them, is now in a different state. And you want me to wait hours to call and have somebody check in on my kids, and they could be anywhere and they could be with anyone. So I definitely would have struggled with that, and I most likely would not have waited until 3 o'clock. And as it was, Tanya only waited till 3:01 before she got the police on the phone. She was able to be put into contact with Chief Weeks, and he decided to drive to the hospital in Toledo, Ohio, and question John himself in an effort to find out where Joanne Taylor might be with the boys, because she never brought them back at 3 p.m. John basically told Chief Weeks he didn't know. He didn't know where she was. He said he'd met Joanne and her family a few years prior. They'd been friends on Facebook ever since. But that was about it. So obviously, the police are going to question him. Well, if you really don't know much about this woman, then why would you let her take your kids? Well, John revealed that the past few months, he had been having some trouble, struggling emotionally. He couldn't get a steady job. He was losing his wife. He was about to lose custody of his children and probably never get it back. The holiday season hadn't made things any better, and he decided to end it all on Thanksgiving, which is why he'd requested his friend Joanne to pick up the boys so they wouldn't be there when he did it. Even though this Joanne woman had never met Alexander, Andrew, or Tanner, she apparently agreed to drive them to John's parents' house in Florida, 15 hours away, on Thanksgiving night so that John could take his own life. And she did nothing to stop him from doing so, nor did she call the police or make any effort to interfere with his plans at all. She just picked up these kids that she'd never met and said she was going to drive them across the country for a man so he could end it all. Obviously, as a trained and seasoned police officer, Chief Weeks knew John was lying, so he issued an Amber Alert for the 3 boys and the silver van that Joanne was allegedly driving, and at this point, the FBI were also brought in to assist.
3 young brothers missing their father in the hospital, and the FBI now getting involved. Tonight, an Amber Alert in effect, and the desperate search continues to find these young boys. Good evening to you. New information continues to come into the newsroom since we first broke this story on Saturday morning. The 3 boys reported missing Friday. That's the same day their dad tried to hang himself in his Morenci home. Tonight, they're now believed to be in extreme danger.
Once this was done, the Morenci police needed to track the movements of John Skelton as well as his sons. They spoke with a neighbor and a family friend, Gail Johnson, who lived next door and is now considered to be the last person to have seen any of these 3 boys alive. She claimed that she saw them playing in the yard on Thanksgiving Day at about 2:30 p.m. 5-year-old Tanner was wearing camo pajama pants and a Scooby-Doo t-shirt. 7-year-old Alexander was wearing black pajama pants and a gray t-shirt, and 9-year-old Andrew was wearing brown pajamas with orange trim. Gail said the boys were always well-behaved and respectful, and whenever she and her husband were outside in their yard, the kids would call over to them and say hello. So that's how she knew that they were there. Morenci Fire Chief Chad Schisler put together a team of 25 volunteers to begin searching vacant lots, parks, and wooded areas in the town. Sheriff's deputies searched the back roads north of the Ohio state line, and in Ohio, Fulton County deputies did the same. Park rangers at Harrison Lake State Park in Ohio, a popular camping area, searched the trails and shrubbery for any sign of the 3 missing boys. Back in Morenci, Chief Weeks had obtained a search warrant to go into John Skelton's home, search it, and take any electronics that they could find. Now, Tanya had brought her keys to the house so they wouldn't have to break the door down, but it turns out having keys did not help with entering that home at that specific time, since John had nailed 2x4s across the door from the inside. Now, Tanya began to panic as the police busted through the door. What would they find on the other side? Were her children inside? Were they hurt or worse, no longer alive? But all they found inside the house was a house that looked like it had been the location of a home invasion. It was a complete disaster area. Broken furniture littered the floor. Broken dishes were scattered all over. Even the mattresses had been cut open, revealing their innards. It had been destroyed by someone who appeared to be incredibly unhinged and out of control.
She has been inside once, though, with police, and she could not believe what she saw inside.
Things that were glass were busted. The big curio cabinet was smashed to pieces along with everything that was inside of it.
What did you feel when you went into the house, Ryan?
It just something didn't seem right. I can't really put it into words. It just didn't. Things didn't add up in the house, and the story that he was giving just didn't add up as well.
That scene was troubling because it wasn't a normal scene. It wasn't. We've been through many crime scenes, and this was the intensity, the things that were destroyed. There wasn't anything usable in that house. The appliances, the cords were cut, the keys were cut, the hutch was knocked over, the dishes were broken. The house was fundamentally destroyed.
Other items recovered from the home are as follows: rope, a noose, bleach, and cleaning products, and a bullet found on the stairs. According to John, the noose was for a project which he can't talk about due to an ongoing investigation. The ropes were for a climbing harness that he was making, and the bullet on the stairs was from a gun collection he'd owned while living in Alaska, which he hadn't been in possession of for some time. When asked about the bleach and cleaning products, he had no creative answer.
As Action News first reported months ago, police found ropes and at least one noose in John's home when they searched it. John says none of what was seized in the home proves he hurt his sons. Your family released the search warrant return from your home the day that the boys were declared missing. And in that search warrant, it said that there was ropes and a noose found in your house, along with a lot of bleach and cleaning products. What exactly were those products for, and why was there a noose in your house?
Bleach and cleaning products. I don't know.
You have 3 minutes.
It was laundry soap in the bathroom. That's it.
You're saying you did not hurt the kids with that noose?
I did. They never even saw that.
Okay, and
They
you
never saw it at all.
did you say that was for a project?
Yes.
Can you describe the project at all?
No. Not right now because of the investigation. The ropes were for a cradle harness. I guess that's what you call it. So I was making a harness to go around my waist and legs, like a rope climbing.
Also, according to the search warrant return, a bullet was found on a stair inside John's home. Skelton says it was part of an old gun collection, which is long gone.
I had them since I lived in Alaska.
Now that the police knew where the boys had been on Thursday afternoon, they could narrow down the period of time that something had happened to them. They started with John Skelton's cell phone records and GPS location, which showed them that in the early morning hours of Friday at 4:29 a.m., John's phone left his home in Rensselaer and traveled towards Ohio. At 5 a.m., John's cell phone basically wasn't pinging anymore, either because it had been purposely turned off or the battery had died. And there was no further GPS activity on it until 6:46 a.m. when it showed that he had returned to his home in Michigan. The last tower ping on the phone was located somewhere around Holiday City, Ohio.
It's around 4:29 that on Friday morning that John's phone is located moving down into Ohio. 4:29. He's about 3.3 miles from his home. And then again at 5 a.m., he's near Holiday City, Pioneer, Ohio, with the phone.
We began driving and looking at that location, directing search parties to that location. Just indicating from what we have from the phone records, I believe the route that we're taking right now would be the most direct route to where the cell towers indicate. Down here it's pretty rural, so the phone towers, there aren't too many of them, and so due to how the phone records and the towers came back, giving us the timestamps, it would lead us to believe that he probably stayed on, at least for the most part, some of the main roads, traveling in the direction that he did. An area in which the cell phone did track towards was an area that John was very familiar with. He was a truck driver and drove to that area for some of the truck driving routes that he had. We also know that he had spent some time with, I believe, with Tanya there. It was kind of a special place for them. We don't know exactly where he was. We just know that the phone pings or the phone tower hits put us in an area that was very consistent with the local distance between Holiday City and Morenci. And knowing what we know from some of the things that Skelton has said, along with talking with family members, this was kind of an important spot to them. I don't know if they had some family outings here, some different things that happened in Holiday City or around this area. So it was just very consistent with the information that the evidence led to, along with some family confirmations that this was a good area.
And he knew this area like the back
Absolutely,
of his hand.
right. The turnpike is right here, the 80-90 turnpike.
This was Black Friday, a day when people notoriously get up very early to go out shopping for doorbuster deals. So the police were actually hopeful that someone may have seen John's blue van in the 2-hour and 17-minute window time period where he'd been traveling from Michigan to Ohio and back. But they were never able to locate anyone who legitimately had seen him. They were also able to determine that once John had gotten back to Michigan, he'd sent some texts and some emails to family members, but it's never really been revealed what those texts and emails said. Speaking of family members, John Skelton would later claim that he'd spoken to his parents on the phone previous to this day, and they'd expressed sympathy for his situation, that he was, going through a divorce and Tanya was trying to keep the kids from him, and his mother offered to drive from Florida to Michigan, pick him up and bring him back to Florida, but just him alone. No Tanya, no kids. Allegedly, they thought he needed to sort of just admit defeat and move on with his life, and they gave him a deadline to make a decision about whether or not he was going to take them up on that offer, and that deadline was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
There was a plan, and it made me feel, I guess, anxiety, or I felt like that was not the thing to do.
The plan John's referring to is his mom and dad told him they would come pick him up, take John by himself back down to Florida. John would live with them by himself, no kids. John says his parents demanded an answer by Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, 2010.
It felt like I was running out of time because I couldn't live there and I couldn't hold a job.
You felt like you were running out of time?
I felt like I was running out of options.
According to John, he felt panicked. He felt like his back was to the wall. He wanted to leave Michigan. He wanted to move to Florida. He'd been wanting to move to Florida for months, but he didn't want to leave the boys with Tanya. So he made a decision that he now regrets, allegedly. And we'll talk about that in a moment. On Monday, November 29th, Chief Weeks revealed some information to the public about the ongoing investigation during a press conference in the fire station's training room. He said that although they could not confirm or deny that Joanne Taylor was an actual person who existed, they could confirm that John Skelton had no relationship online or otherwise with anyone by that name. The only activity on his Facebook page was posts that he'd made on his own wall. The last post that he'd made had been Thanksgiving, Thursday evening, and it had read, "May God and Tanya forgive me." Chief Weeks told the public that he believed John had apparently driven from the Ohio Turnpike into Holiday City and West Unity that Thursday evening or early Friday morning, and he basically asked people to, call in if they'd seen his blue van that was missing a gas cap, because that would have been a very kind of notable thing about his van. Most important about this GPS location stuff, though, is it caused the police to divert their resources and manpower, pull out of Morenci and start searching in that area in Ohio.
And this area was thoroughly searched.
Absolutely. Yes, we searched. We had some information that put us in this area, mainly the cell phone pings, but some other things as well. And we had search teams down here for multiple days, searching buildings, hotels, dumpsters, pole barns, everything that was in the area that could be searched, we searched. Again, with all the information that we had leading up days after it happened, we really thought this was the place where we would find the boys.
It is a very, I mean, you described it, it's very rural. It's very, I mean, there are a lot of back roads, there is a lot of farmland.
Right. And in order for us to search, I mean, we search everything that we can, even with a search party of 100 people. You can search an area or an open field like that very thoroughly. However, there's just hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of acres. And so it really is a needle in a haystack. And we searched the best we could with the evidence and relating to the evidence that we had, but there's just no telling.
The FBI had planes and helicopters searching from the air. They had teams on the ground using police dogs to find the trail of Alexander, Andrew, and Tanner. There was a lot of people who came out to help look for these boys. This was a tight-knit community. Everybody knew each other. They all knew these little kids, and they wanted to find them. 200 volunteers eagerly donated their time to find the boys. They walked door to door. They put up posters featuring smiling pictures of 3 young children that had vanished without a trace.
Prayers tonight for Andrew, Alex, and Tanner. The 3 Skelton brothers police say remain in grave danger the longer they go missing. No one has seen them since Thanksgiving, and everyone here is praying they are out there somewhere and safe. Today marked another day of dozens of volunteers searching this tiny town for any signs of the little boys. Working with few, if any, leads, neighbors here spending the day traipsing through wooded areas, even streams. Haley Simpkins searched late last night. It's personal for her. She knows the boys and their family well.
It's devastating to them to know that they don't know where the boys are.
She's back out today and isn't discouraged when nothing is found.
No, it's not, because then there's hope that they're warm and safe and they're going to be returned to their mother.
The FBI brought cadaver dogs to the Williams County landfill where Holiday City was located, but they found nothing. At the Ohio hospital, John Skelton was questioned again, and he claimed he now had no recollection of what had happened to his sons or anything that had happened late Thursday night into Friday morning. He did, however, remember a dream where he saw his children at an abandoned schoolhouse in Kunkel, Ohio. He also couldn't even remember driving to Holiday City, but he did have a foggy memory of a dumpster located in the parking lot of a Ramada Inn there. Now here's the creepiest part. It's creepy. Allegedly, in 2007, John Skelton had written a poem about a little boy whose body was found in a dumpster. The poem went into details about the thoughts that were running through this boy's mind as he died. The poem was titled The Dumpster, and John had posted it to his MySpace page. I was actually able to find this poem, and I'm going to read it to you now. It's very sad and very disturbing, and it does make you wonder what kind of person would not only think this or think about this in such great depth, but would write it down and then publicly share it with people, knowing that their mind is going to these places that are very dark and very disturbing. Hello, Mama. I see your fuzzy face. I hear your heart beat and feel your warm embrace. I feel you tremble. Don't be scared. What did I do, Mom? What did I say to make you put me down and run away? Are you late for school? Well, that can wait. I'm your little boy, so please, Mom, stay. I'm cold and alone in this metal room with plastic bags and a worn-out broom. Nobody hears me call for you. Come back, Mommy, 'cause I need you. It's my dying breath, and I see a glow. It's an angel from heaven, and he's taking me home. They found nothing at that schoolhouse in Kunkel that John had led them to. They found nothing in that dumpster behind the inn. In my opinion, all of this garbage, literally, that John was telling the police, it was just a way of throwing them off the scent and wasting time, because he knew exactly where those kids were, and it wasn't in any of the places he indicated. He would have been stupid to send the police to the places that he indicated, considering that he didn't want anybody to know what he'd done with his kids. 200 volunteers were split up into teams of 10 with 2 firefighters in charge of each team, and they were bused to the Lazy River campground north of Holiday City, where the Skelton family had allegedly spent some time in the past. They were instructed to pick up everything that could potentially be evidence, pieces of clothing, scraps of paper, trash even, but it was also the first day of hunting season, which meant there was a lot more people not involved with the search who would be roaming through the woods. not only adding their own personal items and trash into the mix of potential evidence, but posing a threat to volunteers looking for the Skelton brothers. They might accidentally get shot, pretty much. In a wooded lot on the northwest corner of an intersection east of Montpelier, Ohio, they found what looked like a shallow grave, roughly 2 feet wide, 3 feet deep, and 4 feet long, with a pile of fresh, damp dirt sitting right next to the hole. The FBI spent about an hour searching this site, and they were never able to figure out why it was there or who dug it, but they also weren't able to connect it to the Skelton brothers. This same day, as hundreds of volunteers were searching for her sons, Tanya had to hear the news that a Toledo television station had aired a story titled "Mom of Missing Michigan Boys on Sex Offender List." The next day, Tuesday, November 30th, the volunteers gathered again to continue searching. While this was happening, John Skelton was released from the Toledo hospital where he was under like a mental health hold, and he was transferred to the Lucas County Jail in Toledo, and he was actively fighting the extradition order that would bring him back to Michigan. And more than that, his story had changed again. And while he was behind bars, he got a visit from his parents and from the pastor of his church. And I guess both of these parties kind of left this visit with him feeling differently. John's parents left saying that they believed everything he said and that he was doing the right thing and nobody was listening to his side of the story.
Said to tell you that his boys are safe and sound.
His kids are fine. I know this as a grandmother. I have a grandmother's heart, and I know this. I don't know where they are. If I did, they wouldn't be there.
Well, they say it's 100%. Do you feel 100% that John gave the kids to somebody?
Yes.
You do believe that?
Yes.
And you believe that those kids are safe with
Yes.
whoever that group is?
Yes.
You're 100% confident that your son is telling the truth?
Yes.
So you believe that to this day, those boys
I
are fine?
believe those boys are fine.
You believe that, or do you want to believe that?
No, I believe it. I believe it full in my heart. I believe it totally, 100% that them boys are fine.
They basically claimed they didn't doubt one word that came out of his mouth, but the pastor had a little bit of a different experience with John Skelton that day.
I asked him to start from the very beginning.
Pastor Donna Galloway was shaking, trying to talk between the tears as she recounted conversations she had with John Skelton soon after Alexander, Andrew, and Tanner disappeared.
That I would listen to whatever he had to say and do whatever I could to bring the boys home.
Galloway is the pastor of Morency's United Methodist Church. He turned to his pastor for comfort, but she says she wanted answers.
And that's when he said to me that there was a big blank spot in his brain. It was like a big dark hole. He didn't know that the boys were. He didn't know what happened.
Those first conversations were followed by a bizarre phone call from Skelton. Pastor Donna was still in the hospital, but in a room where family had gathered, along with an FBI agent. That's when, she says, Skelton called and told her in an angry, impatient tone he had taken the boys home. Not back to his ex-wife Tanya, not to a relative, but that he had taken them home, and that the pastor, of all people, should know what he meant.
You came to the conclusion then those boys are no longer with us.
In my head. In my head.
I asked Skelton what he meant when he told the pastor he had sent the boys home. You left her with the impression, even though you didn't say it, but you intimated that your children were dead.
No, yeah, well, the FBI and Donna were into that tune, and they would not listen. They wouldn't leave me alone. So I let them go on their rant.
So it's not true?
Oh, absolutely not.
So like I said, John's story changed again. The police had figured out that John didn't know anyone named Joanne Taylor. And more than that, once they got into his computers, they discovered that it had been John himself who created a fake account using the name Joanne Taylor, which he had then used to friend Tanya on Cafe Mom. This had happened shortly after she'd filed for divorce, and it does raise some questions. Did John create this account so he could keep tabs on his wife under the guise of being an unassuming fellow mom? Or had he created it so he'd have a paper trail for this woman, meaning what ended up happening to his sons was premeditated and he was planning it for months in advance? But now that the cops are like, okay, we know Joanne Taylor's not real, we know you made her up, John Skelton had to pivot and come up with a new story that still didn't place the responsibility of his children's disappearance directly on him. At this point, John had claimed he'd been trying to hang himself, but he failed, falling to the ground 10 feet below him, hitting concrete or asphalt, and breaking his foot. And he was in a wheelchair. He was being wheeled around in a wheelchair, but he was sporting a soft shoe cast, which confused people, including medical health professionals, because if he had fallen from a height of 10 feet, you'd expect to see a more serious injury that would require an actual plaster cast, not just a soft cast. A soft cast is usually used for like small hairline fractures, if you twisted your ankle. But if you fell onto concrete from 10 feet up, you're going to have more than a hairline fracture in your ankle. You're going to break your foot, most likely, and you'd need an actual plaster cast to set the bones so that they heal properly. John still claimed that Joanne Taylor was a real person that he knew, but now he was saying she was connected to a secretive group of people. He alleged that he had discovered his wife was abusing his sons, so he reached out to this secret organization who helps remove kids from dangerous circumstances, a rescue organization run by either Mennonites or the Amish or some reorganized Mormons. Eventually, John admitted that he didn't really know any of their names since they used aliases like Virgil and Elijah, and it had actually been Niles, Michigan, where he'd first met one of these people on November 1st. Which is funny because previously he'd used the name Niles as one of the people who had taken his kids, but then he said, no, there was no Niles. It was actually Niles, Michigan. So I don't know what he's doing. Is he doing one of those things where he tries to mix in the truth with his lies so that it makes it more convincing? Because it's not working. It's not working. So let's break it down quickly because it's confusing. We've got Joanne Taylor, who has some relationship to this secret child-saving group. We've got a man named Virgil, who John met in Niles, a man named Elijah, a woman named Sue, and 2 children named Mary and Alex. Now, when he meets these people, I don't know how this conversation would have come up randomly out of the blue when you meet people like this for the first time. But allegedly, according to John, when he met Virgil, John confessed to him that he didn't want his sons to be with their mother, who was hurting them. And Virgil offered to help. Within a week, John found a manila envelope in his mailbox with business cards and pamphlets on an organization called United Foster Outreach. There was also a burner phone in the mailbox, which he used to call them, after which he dumped the phone and burned the paperwork conveniently, because now you have no evidence that this ever happened. According to John, this group of people made a number of visits to his home on the weekends while his sons were there so that the boys would get used to these strange people. And on November 25th, they came back to his house with Amish-style coats for the boys to wear, and John let these people take the kids, expecting that later they would reach out to him to let him know how he could communicate with them and check in on his children. Now, keep in mind, no law enforcement agency could ever confirm the existence of such a group, including the FBI. But John had an answer for this as well, saying, quote, "It's an organization that knows what it's doing. We covered our tracks well," end quote. Even though they lied to him about only taking the children for one night, John told police he still felt that his sons were better off with this mysterious group of strangers than with their mother.
John Skelton says he gave his boys to an underground group. He says the boys are safe with them. He also says he's given the police all the information he can.
Like I'm saying, to heck with you. It's your problem, not mine. I've been helping them.
John told investigators he gave the boys to a group of people to keep them away from their mother, Tanya. John says Tanya was abusing their children.
Did you want to get back at Tanya for everything she had done?
No, just like I told you, I didn't do anything to try to hurt Tanya. I still love Tanya. It was my mom who told me I had to stop saying that.
Why did your mom tell you had to stop saying that?
I don't know. Maybe she thought it sounded stupid, ridiculous, or made me look
like an idiot. I don't know.
We asked John if the underground group that has his kids were to hurt the boys, what would he do?
If I found out and I found him, I'd probably end up back in here because I'd hurt them.
So you think that person who, God forbid, ever hurt them, they should be hurt?
Yeah.
He says if he could go back and change things, he would.
I wouldn't burn all my evidence, any contacts, any evidence whatsoever. I wouldn't have burned that. I would have gotten, my parents involved, asked them what I should, if I should really do this, ask them, if there's any other things that I could do. I don't know. I would have done a lot of things different, I suppose.
So once again, according to John, these people picked up the kids that night and they were like, we're going to do a trial sleepover sort of thing to see how they do with us and in their new environment, and we'll let you know how it goes. This is just a trial, and it's just another step in preparing them to, eventually move in with us to get them away from their abusive, horrible mother. It's worth noting that these allegations of abuse on Tanya's behalf were investigated thoroughly, and detectives claim that they came upon no information that Tanya had abused or harmed her sons in any way ever. In fact, all the evidence they gathered pointed to the contrary. Everybody they talked to basically said that they didn't know a mother who loved her sons more, or who protected and cared for her sons more. Everyone that was talked to said Tanya was a good mother. And from what the police did know, from the evidence that they had gotten, it all pointed to the fact that John Skelton had done something nefarious with his children. The police had even told John, we'll look into this, and if these accusations you're making are true, we'll work with you to get the children placed in the home of a third party where they'll be safe while we figure out what to do. All you have to do is tell us where they are so we can get them, we can bring them home, and then we'll do everything in our power to make sure that they remain safe. And if there's any truth to these allegations, if there's any truth that Tanya's hurting them, we'll be able to talk to them. I mean, the older two were 7 and 9 at this point. They would have been able to verbally confirm if their mother had been abusing them or not. But John refused. He told the police pretty much, even if I wanted to tell you where they were, I couldn't, because I don't know where they are, because this mysterious child-saving group never contacted him again after they left with his kids. But he did mention to the police that his sons would have to hibernate until they graduate, whatever the hell that means. Keep in mind, this was the eventual rough version of the story that John would settle on once being questioned in court. Little things would change here and there, but this is the gist of it. But earlier, he had claimed that he'd driven the boys out to JD's truck stop in Niles, Michigan, and that's where Virgil took the kids from him. Another version of the story has John tenderly wrapping his sons in blankets in the van and placing a stuffed animal in each of their hands before sending them off with Virgil. And 1 week before the boys vanished, John Skelton searched on the internet for things such as rat poison. Will rat poison kill people? And can I break someone's neck with my hands? When questioned about these searches, John claimed that his sons had asked him these things, and he was just Googling the answers so he could tell them. What a great dad. I can just see it now. The kids are like, Dad, we really want to know if rat poison will kill someone. And John's like, let me look that up for you kids, because I really want to teach you. That's what parents do. We teach you. We teach you things about how to break people's necks with your own hands and how to kill people with rat poison. Let's Google it. And on November 26th, after getting back from his late night Ohio trip, John had dropped off some things to his aunt's house. These items were his son's winter coats and toothbrushes, and he allegedly told his aunt that they wouldn't be needing them anymore, and he didn't want their mother to have the memories. On Wednesday, December 1st, John Skelton's bond was set for $3 million. His parents visited him in jail, but he didn't tell them anything, according to them. On December 2nd, the searches continued, focusing on waterways in Williams County and the 300-plus acres of wooded area near Kunkel, Ohio. These searches, like all others, turned up nothing. But the next day, Friday, December 3rd, the volunteers showed up again, even as the temperatures dropped and everyone realized that there was little chance these boys would be found alive. That morning, Chief Weeks announced that this would be the last day of the mass searches. A reported sighting of the boys did come in on December 7th from an employee of the House of Donuts in Sandusky, Ohio. This employee's name was Sandy Jones, and Sandy said she was working the Sunday after Thanksgiving when a woman who appeared to be in her 40s and who looked tired and haggard quickly ushered 3 little boys into the shop, not making eye contact with anyone the entire time they were there. According to Sandy, she heard this woman call one of the boys Tanner, and later when she saw their pictures in the paper, she knew the boys had been the Skelton brothers. The House of Donuts was not far off the Ohio Turnpike, where the FBI had been pulling surveillance footage from businesses in hopes of seeing John Skelton on camera. Unfortunately, the donut shop was a small privately owned business and they didn't have surveillance cameras, so this sighting was never confirmed. Since the very beginning, since day one, Chief Weeks had not been optimistic that they would find Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner alive and unharmed, but he didn't want to announce that the case had transitioned from searching for missing kids to a homicide investigation until a snow day in mid-February. He knew how tight-knit the community was, especially the children who went to school together, since there were very small classes. The following year, in 2011, the high school's graduating class held only 37 students. Weeks wanted to make sure that when the news broke, the classmates of all 3 boys would be home with their families where they could find comfort and familiarity. I have to give him a lot of credit, honestly, because when he announced it to the media during a press conference that he'd been withholding this information for several months, he apologized, but he stated, quote, "The people of this town are my concern, but you are not," before telling the reporters to be safe driving home. There was a winter storm brewing, and 10 inches of snow was expected to fall that day. There would be no more searches for the 3 missing boys as winter rolled into Morenci, blindingly white, bitterly cold, and completely unforgiving. That's going to be where we end off today. There is going to be a part 2, but it's not going to be an extended series. There's just one more part to follow. There was just too much information to really fit into one video. So we will have another part to follow, but that's going to be it. Just 2 parts, and the story will be complete. Let me know in the comments what you think about this so far, if you've ever heard of it, what your theories are. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, where I update more regularly on, just day-to-day cases that I'm following, even though I haven't been super active this last week because social media has been driving me crazy. Make sure you click the like button if you liked this video. Make sure you share this video if you think it's worth sharing. And if you've already subscribed, just make sure you're still subscribed and your notifications are turned on so you get notified every time I post a video. YouTube's been unsubscribing people and turning notifications off for my channel for a while now, so I just want to make sure everybody keeps an eye on that. And also, if you are here and you're watching this video and it's been like a couple videos of mine you've been watching and you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. We have a great community here. We are very open and welcome, and we love chatting about true crime. Thank you so much to Glasses USA for sponsoring this video. If you're interested in getting an amazing pair of glasses for an amazing price, don't forget to click the link in the description box. You can get 60% off of your first pair of frames. Thank you so much to my Patreons who keep this channel going consistently. They get early access to almost every single one of my videos, so they're able to let me know what they think about them before I put them out. I really, really, really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for always being there for me, and thank you to all of you who come back and watch these videos time and time again. I appreciate you beyond words. I hope everybody's having an amazing day. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.
The battle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly, so you got to let it go. I got blood.